So let's get started here. We're going to discuss first of all a processing application that's going to send data from keystrokes in processing onto a custom attribute in Maya. This will be the first part of a three-part video series. So this processing code is downloadable from the link at the bottom of the video here. I'm just going to run quickly over it here and talk about how it's working, and you could follow along and recreate it from this video. It's not all that complicated. So first of all, the first line here is importing the .NET library from processing. This is a standard library that comes with processing, and import processing.net .star imports the whole thing. Next, we're going to instantiate a client instance. So the client is the class that we're going to use to send the data to Maya, and we're going to call this instance Maya client. Next, we're going to declare some variables. The first one is going to be a string called message. Message sends the data to Maya after it builds the mel command, and so we'll declare the string up here and we'll set it to an empty space. Next, we'll declare our two data channels that we're going to send to Maya, and they're going to be called F1 and F2. I've set them to floats for now, even though the keyboard data that we'll be getting is 0 and 1 data, so it could be an integer, but float is handier because we'll be able to then adapt it to other things later on if we so need there. So we've got float F1 equals 0 and float F2 equals 0. Next, we're going to set up in the setup method of processing the listening host name and the command port in Maya that this data is going to be sent to. So we do that with Maya client. I'm going to make a new client. This refers back to the parent client wrapper. The place where it's going to be sent, this could be an IP, but since I'm going to send it to my own computer, localhost is how we can address a port on the same computer as where the data is being sent from. The port number I'm going to pick is 6004, and that's an arbitrary number I like. I'm also going to set the frame rate of the processing sketch to 25 frames a second. This is quite good because this will match the frame rate in Maya and won't force Maya to run faster than 25 frames a second when the timeline is running. Kind of holds the thing throttled back. And that's the end of the setup method. Okay, we're going to have two methods here for the keys. This is a little bit complicated. We're going to have a key pressed and a key released, and that way we can set the value to 1, but when the key is released, the value will be set back to 0. So key pressed is if the key equals 1, and this is in single quotes here, then F1 is going to equal 1. And if the keystroke that has been pressed is a 2, then F2 will be equal to 1. Okay. We can cut and paste this down into the key released method, and it's almost exactly the same. So if the key is 1 and it's been released, F1 is going to be set to 0. And if the key equals 2 and it's released, F2 is going to be equal to 0. And you could keep on going on here and add in more keys if you so desired. This is just a test sketch to prove that we can actually get the data into Maya and do some simple interactions in real time. Okay, next we come to the draw method, which is what happens at 24 frames a second once the sketch is running, and 25 frames a second. And in the draw, all we do is send the data straight on to Maya, formatted as a mel command. So our message variable, which we set to a blank string, is what's going to hold the message as we build it. We could probably do that right down in the right here, but this makes it a little bit more readable. So we're going to construct our 2 lines of mel, and the first one's going to be set attribute, setattr, space info, that's the name of the node we'll build in Maya, and F1 is the name of a custom attribute that we'll add. It's important to leave this space here so that the mel command comes out formatted properly. Then we'll add the value of F1, so that's whether the key 1 is pressed or released at the time when draw spins its data out at 25 frames a second. We'll add in a semicolon to finish that mel line, and then we'll add another mel line, which almost the same, set attribute on the info node, the custom attribute F2 this time, and we'll set it to the value of F2. We'll end that mel statement, that mel line, with a semicolon, and then here we end the message build and a semicolon to finish that line. Right, all we need now to do is to send that off to Maya, and we'll do that with the write method to the Maya client that we've instantiated. And that's all for this sketch. So a very simple way, I think, of getting real-time data into Maya. Join us for part 2 in this series, and we'll look at Maya and how to deal with this data once we get it into Maya.